The quantum resonance detector chimed for the first time in 7 years, 3 months, and 12 days. Naira Zen's crystalline fingers paused over her research console, her iridescent eyes widening at the unexpected sound. In 20 years of solitary observation aboard Station Helios, she had documented exactly 43 anomalies. None had ever approached this close. The station's curved viewport revealed the usual vista, the hypnotic swirl of the quantum storm she'd spent 2 decades studying, its violet tendrils dancing against the backdrop of space. But now something was different. A ship, sleek and unfamiliar, was navigating the storm's outer edges with surprising skill. Naira's translucent skin shifted colors rapidly, a sign of agitation her species couldn't fully control. No one was supposed to find her here. The station's quantum camouflage had kept her hidden from the galaxy while she conducted her research, hidden from those who would misuse her findings, hidden from her own people who thought her work too dangerous to continue. The ship was definitely of human design. Their characteristic engineering aesthetics were unmistakable. Naira had studied their species from afar, but had never encountered one in person. They were notorious for their curiosity, their resilience, and their tendency to appear exactly where they weren't expected. "Station, initiate contact protocols," she commanded, her melodic voice echoing in the empty chamber. There was no response. After 20 years of silence, the automated systems had degraded more than she'd realized. She would have to handle this herself. The human vessel was now close enough for her to make out its designation, ESS Horizon, a research vessel. Then, not military, not pirates. This could be worse, but it could also be much better. Commander Julian Reeves squinted at his ship's sensors, trying to make sense of the readings. The quantum storm they'd been tasked with studying was behaving impossibly. Energy patterns suggested an artificial containment field, but that technology wasn't supposed to exist yet. "Run the scan again, Horizon," he ordered, brushing back graying hair from his forehead. 25 years of deep space exploration had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming that something extraordinary was happening. "Confirmed, Commander," the ship's AI responded. "The storm's boundary layer shows signs of deliberate manipulation. There appears to be a structure at the core of the phenomenon." Julian leaned forward, fascination overwhelming caution. His mission to study the quantum storm had just become far more interesting. "Can we pierce the camouflage field?" "Negative, but..." The AI paused. "We are being hailed." A voice filled the bridge, unlike anything Julian had ever heard. It was like crystal wind chimes in a summer breeze, yet carried perfect clarity. "Human vessel, you are approaching a restricted research zone. State your purpose." Julian exchanged glances with his senior science officer, Dr. Riza Patel, before responding. "This is Commander Julian Reeves of the Earth Science Ship Horizon. We're conducting research on quantum storm phenomena. May I ask who we're speaking with?" There was a long pause. Julian could almost feel the weight of 2 decades of isolation in that silence. "I am Dr. Naira Zen, last graduate of the Crystalline Academy of Quantum Sciences. You have found my research station." Another pause. "Your ship's approach vector is dangerously unstable. If you adjust course 3 degrees port and match the frequency I'm transmitting, you will find safe passage through the storm's outer layer." Julian nodded to his navigator to follow the instructions. The route opened before them like a curtain being drawn back, revealing a massive space station floating in the eye of the quantum storm. Its architecture was organic yet precise, with crystalline spires that seemed to grow from a central core. "Remarkable," Dr. Patel whispered. "The station appears to be grown, rather than constructed." "Your observation is correct." Naira's voice returned, a hint of pride evident. "Station Helios was seeded from a single crystal matrix 20 years ago. It has grown alongside my research." She hesitated again. "Commander Reeves, I have not spoken to another sentient being in 20 years. My social protocols may be rusty, but if you wish to discuss our mutual scientific interests, I will permit you to dock." Julian smiled. He recognized the tone of someone who had been alone with their work for far too long. "We would be honored, Dr. Zen. Though I have to ask, why 20 years of isolation?" The response was quiet, almost reverent. "Commander, what I study here could either save the galaxy or tear it apart. Isolation wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. Until now, perhaps." As the Horizon maneuvered toward the crystal docking port, Julian couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to step into something far bigger than a simple research mission. In the quantum storm's light, the station's crystals pulsed with energy, like a heart beating in anticipation of its first visitor in 20 years. What he couldn't know was that Naira was watching his approach through multiple sensor arrays, her color-shifting skin now cycling through shades of anticipation and fear. After 20 years of certainty, of control, of perfect isolation, she was about to face the most unpredictable force she knew of: human curiosity. The crystalline airlock cycled open with a harmonic hum that sent vibrations through Julian's bones. He stepped into Station Helios alongside Dr. Patel, both of them momentarily stunned by the alien beauty of their surroundings. The corridor seemed alive, its translucent walls pulsing with the same energy that powered the quantum storm outside. But it was the station's sole inhabitant who truly captured their attention. Dr. Naira Zen stood nearly 7 feet tall, her crystalline form both elegant and otherworldly. Her translucent skin shifted through shades of blue and violet, and her iridescent eyes studied them with an intensity that spoke of both scientific curiosity and deep caution. "Welcome to Station Helios," Naira said, her melodic voice echoing off the crystal walls. "You are the first visitors I have received since—" She paused, her skin flickering with uncertainty. "Since I chose this path." Julian noticed how she kept a precise distance from them, her movements carefully measured. "Thank you for allowing us aboard, Dr. Zen. Your work on quantum storm containment is unprecedented." "You recognize the containment patterns." Naira's colors shifted to a brighter hue. "Most observers mistake them for natural phenomena." Dr. Patel stepped forward, his dark eyes bright with excitement. "The energy signature is too precise to be natural. But the implications of such technology," he trailed off, looking around the station with renewed wonder, "are exactly why I chose isolation." Naira finished. She gestured for them to follow her through the twisting corridors. "My people, the Crystalline Collective, believed this research was too dangerous to pursue. They feared what might happen if the wrong entities gained control of quantum manipulation technology." The central laboratory they entered took Julian's breath away. A miniature version of the quantum storm outside swirled in a containment field at the room's center, its energy patterns mirroring the larger phenomenon perfectly. "You've created a perfect simulation," Julian breathed, but Naira's soft laugh corrected him. "No, Commander. This is not a simulation. This is a quantum seed, a controlled fragment of the storm itself. Through it, I can study and influence the larger storm's behavior." Her colors darkened slightly. "It is also why I cannot allow my research to leave this station." Julian turned to face her directly. "Dr. Zen, we're not here to steal your work. The Horizon's mission is purely scientific. Your intentions may be pure," Naira acknowledged, moving to a console that seemed to grow from the floor itself. "But your presence here has already changed everything. The quantum seed responds to consciousness, to observation itself. Having new observers here," she gestured to the swirling energy, which had begun to pulse in an unfamiliar pattern. Dr. Patel's eyes widened. "It's destabilizing." "No," Naira said, her tone filled with surprise. "It's evolving. Your human consciousness, it interacts with quantum energy differently than mine." Her colors shifted rapidly through shades of excitement and concern. "In 20 years, I've never seen patterns like this." Julian watched as she worked at her console, her crystalline fingers dancing over controls that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. "You've been alone all this time to prevent outside influence on your experiments." "Partially," Naira admitted. But isolation also protected others from me. She turned to face them, her form now emanating a soft glow. My species has a unique relationship with quantum energy. We can sense it, shape it, become one with it. But prolonged exposure changes us. I am no longer the same being who arrived here 20 years ago. As if to demonstrate, she raised her hand toward the quantum seed. Energy arced between her crystalline form and the swirling storm, creating patterns that defied physical laws. I have become something new, something my people would fear. Not fear, Dr. Patil interjected. Envy, perhaps. You've achieved what scientists have dreamed of for centuries. True quantum manipulation. Naira's colors shifted to a deep, sorrowful purple. At what cost? I can never return to my people. My very presence could destabilize their crystalline matrices now. I am alone because I must be. Julian stepped closer, ignoring the crackling energy in the air. No one has to be alone, Dr. Zen. Isolation might protect your research, but it also limits it. Look at what happened the moment new perspectives entered your laboratory. The quantum seed pulsed brightly, as if emphasizing his point. Naira studied it, then turned her iridescent gaze to Julian. You are suggesting collaboration. Despite the risks, I'm suggesting that 20 years is long enough to work in solitude. Julian said softly. Let us help you. If the technology is as dangerous as you believe, isn't it better to have others who understand it, who can help protect it? Naira's form seemed to crystallize further, becoming more faceted, more complex. Your words have merit, Commander, but they also carry danger. If we proceed, she gestured to the quantum seed, which had begun forming entirely new patterns. There will be no going back, for any of us. Sometimes, Julian replied, watching the beautiful and terrible energy dance between Naira's crystalline form and the seed. Moving forward is the only way to preserve what matters most. Dr. Patil cleared his throat. The quantum storm outside. It's responding to our conversation. The patterns are shifting. Naira nodded, her colors now a symphony of complexity. Yes, like calls to like. Change calls to change. She turned to Julian, her expression unreadable, but her voice carrying the weight of 20 years of solitude. Very well, Commander. Let us see what human curiosity and crystalline wisdom can achieve together. But remember, you asked for this. As if in response to her words, the quantum seed flared brilliantly, casting their shadows in a dozen directions at once. In that moment, Julian understood that he had just committed his ship and crew to something far beyond their original mission. But looking at Naira, seeing both the power and loneliness she carried, he knew it was the right choice. What he couldn't know was that across the galaxy, on a world of living crystal, sensors were already detecting the change in quantum patterns. The crystalline collective was about to discover that their lost daughter had not only survived, she had evolved, and she was no longer alone. The warning came 3 days after the Horizon's arrival. Naira was deep in explanation of quantum resonance patterns to an enthralled Dr. Patil when every crystal in Station Helios began to sing. The harmonics were beautiful but terrible, a sound she hadn't heard in 20 years. They're coming, she whispered, her crystalline form dimming to a deep indigo. The collective has sensed the changes in the quantum field. Julian looked up from the sensor data he'd been studying. Your people? How long do we have? Hours, perhaps. Naira moved to the central console, her movements now sharp with urgency. Their vessels traverse quantum space in ways your sensors cannot detect. When they arrive, they will try to shut down my research. They may even attempt to. She hesitated, colors swirling in distress. To reintegrate me. Reintegrate? Dr. Patil asked, though his tone suggested he already feared the answer. My prolonged exposure to quantum energy has changed me fundamentally. The collective will see me as a contamination risk. They will attempt to break down my current form and absorb my consciousness back into their gestalt. Naira's fingers danced over the controls, bringing up complex energy patterns. 20 years of work, of evolution, of becoming something new. They will try to undo it all. Julian straightened, his expression hardening. The horizon won't let that happen. We can evacuate you, find somewhere safe. No. Naira's voice carried a resonance that made the station's crystals vibrate. I will not run. This research is too important. The quantum storm holds secrets that could revolutionize space travel, energy production, even the nature of consciousness itself. But it must be understood properly, controlled carefully. She turned to face them fully. If the collective takes control, they will simply seal it away, declaring it too dangerous to study. The quantum seed at the center of the laboratory pulsed erratically, responding to her agitation. Dr. Patel moved to a secondary console, his fingers flying over the controls. The storm outside is also becoming unstable. The changes we've been studying, they're accelerating. Because I am afraid, Naira admitted quietly. My emotional state affects the quantum field now. Another reason the collective will see me as a threat. Julian stepped closer to her, ignoring the crackling energy that surrounded her crystalline form. Then let's give them a reason to listen instead. Show me what you need us to do. For a moment, Naira's colors shifted through shades he'd never seen before, emotions his human mind couldn't quite comprehend. You would stand with me against beings who could reduce your ship to its component atoms. You've spent 20 years protecting the galaxy from power that could be misused, Julian replied. We're not about to let that dedication be wasted. Besides, he smiled slightly, humans have a reputation for succeeding where we shouldn't. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Dr. Patel worked with Naira to stabilize the quantum field around the station, while Julian prepared the horizon for potential conflict. They couldn't match the collective's technology, but they could prove that humanity's presence had led to breakthroughs rather than contamination. There, Naira said finally, stepping back from the main console, I've modified the quantum field to accommodate human brainwave patterns. When the collective arrives, they will be forced to acknowledge that other species can safely interact with quantum energy. That isolation is not the only answer. The station's crystals sang again, but this time the tone was different. A warning. Dr. Patel checked his readings and paled slightly. Multiple quantum distortions forming. They're here. 3 ships emerged from seemingly empty space, their crystalline forms catching and refracting light in impossible ways. Each was easily twice the size of the horizon, and their very presence seemed to make reality flicker around them. The Council of Resonance, Naira breathed, her form becoming more faceted, more rigid. They rarely leave the homeworld themselves. They must consider me a greater threat than I imagined. A voice filled the station, not sound exactly, but pure resonance that translated itself into meaning in their minds. Naira Zen, you have violated quarantine protocols. You have exposed primitive beings to quantum technologies beyond their evolution. You have become discordant. Prepare for reintegration. Julian stepped forward, his voice firm. This is Commander Julian Reeves of the Earth Science Ship Horizon. Dr. Zen's research has already provided invaluable insights into quantum mechanics. We're here as collaborators, not contaminations. There was a pause, and the resonance returned, tinged with something like surprise. The human vessel attempts to shield the discordant one. Your species cannot comprehend. Look at your own readings, Naira interrupted, her voice carrying the same resonant quality now. Observe the quantum seed. Human consciousness interacts with quantum fields in ways we never imagined. They bring chaos, yes, but also new patterns, new possibilities. The quantum seed pulsed, its energy patterns shifting into configurations that even Naira had never seen before. The human presence had catalyzed something entirely new, a fusion of crystalline precision and human adaptability. Impossible, the collective voice resonated. The patterns, they are stable, but they should not be. 20 years ago, you told me my research was too dangerous to pursue, Naira said, her colors blazing with conviction. You were right. For any one species to control this power alone would be catastrophic. But together, with different perspectives, different ways of thinking. She gestured to Julian and Dr. Pottle. We can achieve balance. The crystalline ships moved closer, their sensors probing the station intensely. Julian held his breath, knowing the next few moments would determine not just Naira's fate, but potentially the future of human collective relations. Finally, the resonance returned, carrying a different tone. The Council must reconsider its position. These patterns require further study. The human presence offers unexpected harmonies. Naira's colors shifted to something bright and warm, and Julian felt himself smiling. Sometimes, he thought, 20 years of solitude could end in a moment of perfect understanding. In the days following the collective's departure, Station Helios transformed. Where once silent corridors had echoed with solitude, now they hummed with activity. The Council had assigned 3 of their youngest crystalline scientists to study under Naira, while the Horizons crew established a permanent research outpost within the station. But for Naira, the greatest transformation was internal. Your quantum signature is still fluctuating, Dr. Patel noted, studying the readings from his scanner. They stood in what had become their primary laboratory, the quantum seed casting ever-changing patterns across their faces. The interaction with human consciousness continues to affect your crystalline structure. Naira examined her own hand, watching as new facets formed and reformed. 20 years of certainty of knowing exactly what I was becoming. Now, she turned to Julian, who was reviewing reports at a newly installed human console. Now I find myself changing in ways I never anticipated. Julian looked up, concern crossing his features. Is it dangerous? No. Naira's colors shifted through thoughtful shades of blue and green. But it is uncomfortable. Like learning to breathe again after centuries underwater. Human emotions are so. She searched for the word. Immediate. One of the young crystalline scientists, Vero, approached with a data crystal. Elder Zen, we've completed the preliminary analysis of the human brainwave interactions. The patterns are fascinating. Their neural chaos actually stabilizes certain quantum fluctuations. Through controlled instability, Naira nodded, a concept that would have been heretical to the collective 20 years ago. She accepted the crystal, but her hand trembled slightly as she did so. Julian noticed immediately. You need rest. When was the last time you entered quantum suspension? 43 hours ago, Naira admitted. I find myself reluctant. To sleep is to return to silence, to solitude. After 20 years of embracing it, I now find myself. Her colors dimmed in embarrassment. Afraid of being alone again, Julian finished softly. Dr. Patel tactfully moved away to examine some readings, taking Vero with him. Julian stepped closer to Naira, careful to maintain the distance her crystalline form required. Fear is not a concept my people easily acknowledge, Naira said, her voice barely above a whisper. We seek harmony, perfect resonance. Fear creates discord. And yet, she gestured to the quantum seed, which rippled with new patterns. Look how beautiful discord can be. You're not just talking about quantum physics anymore, are you? Julian smiled. In 20 years of isolation, I thought I had learned everything about myself, about what I was becoming. Naira's form shifted, becoming more translucent, more vulnerable. But your presence here, the human capacity for adaptation, for embracing uncertainty, it awakens questions I thought I had answered. The station's crystals sang softly, responding to her emotional state. Julian watched in fascination as the walls seemed to pulse in sync with her words. The collective believes in perfect order, perfect harmony. But life, real life, is messy. It's chaotic. She paused, her colors swirling with complex emotions. It's human. If you're worried about losing yourself, Julian said carefully, we can reduce the interaction times. Set up stronger barriers. No. Naira's response was immediate, her form crystallizing with certainty. I chose isolation once because I feared change. I will not make that mistake again. She moved to the quantum seed's containment field, her fingers trailing through the energy. Besides, the changes are already fundamental. Observe. She touched a crystal on the wall, and suddenly the room filled with a holographic display of her own quantum structure. Julian gasped. Within her crystalline matrix, entirely new patterns had formed, patterns that looked remarkably similar to human neural pathways. Your consciousness is adapting, Dr. Paddle said, unable to contain his scientific curiosity as he rejoined them, creating new pathways to process human emotional responses. More than that, Naira replied. I am becoming a bridge, neither purely crystalline nor human, but something in between, something that can truly understand both perspectives. She turned to Julian, her eyes shimmering with new intensity. The question is, does this make me more or less than what I was? Julian considered her question carefully. 20 years ago, you isolated yourself to protect others from change. Now you're embracing change to protect others from isolation. I'd say that makes you more, infinitely more. The quantum seed pulsed brightly, as if in agreement. Naira's colors shifted to a warm, deep gold, a new shade that Julian had never seen before. The collective fears contamination, she said slowly. They believe that maintaining purity of form is essential to our survival. But what if? She paused, her next words carrying the weight of revelation. What if adaptation is not contamination? What if change is not corruption, but evolution? The young crystalline scientist, Vero, approached again, their form showing signs of similar subtle changes. Elder Zen, I believe. I am experiencing emotional resonance. It is unsettling, but not unpleasant. Naira laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze. Welcome to the Discord, young one. Tell me, is the silence as loud for you as it once was for me? As if in answer, the station's crystals sang again, but this time the sound was different. A harmony of crystalline precision and human warmth. A new song for a new kind of existence. Julian watched as Naira began explaining the experience to her young prodigy, her movements more fluid now, less rigidly crystalline. In breaking her isolation, they hadn't just changed her. They'd started a transformation that could reshape the relationship between their species forever. The question was, were both sides ready for what that transformation might bring? The quantum storm surrounding Station Helios had changed. Where once it had been a swirling barrier of violet energy, now it danced with new colors, blues and golds that mimicked the emotional spectrum of its observers. 6 months had passed since the Horizon's arrival, and nothing remained quite the same. Naira stood at the station's main viewport, watching as a crystalline transport ship emerged from quantum space. Her reflection in the crystal walls showed how much she had changed. Her once purely geometric form now flowed like liquid crystal, adapting moment by moment to the emotions she no longer tried to suppress. Another delegation, Julian asked, joining her at the viewport. Their shoulders nearly touched, something that would have been impossible months ago, when her crystalline field was less stable. The fourth this week, she confirmed, her colors shifting through amused shades of blue. Word has spread through the collective. The young ones especially are curious about alternative paths of evolution. The transport docked with harmonic precision, and soon the station's corridors filled with the musical sounds of crystalline beings trying to modulate their resonance to accommodate human hearing. Dr. Patel led the new arrivals on the now familiar tour, his enthusiasm for cross-species collaboration undimmed by repetition. They're adapting more quickly than you did, Julian observed, watching as one young crystalline scientist attempted, and managed, a human handshake with a Horizon crew member. They don't have 20 years of isolation to overcome, Naira replied softly. And they have something I didn't have. Proof that change doesn't mean destruction. The quantum seed pulsed in its containment field, drawing their attention. Its patterns had grown increasingly complex over the months, reflecting the mingled consciousness of humans and crystalline beings working in harmony. But today, something was different. The resonance patterns. Naira moved closer to the field, her scientific curiosity overtaking everything else. They're stabilizing into a new configuration. Julian followed her to the containment field, checking the readings on his modified scanner. These energy signatures, they're unlike anything we've recorded before. Because they're not just quantum patterns anymore, Dr. Patel called from the doorway, having returned from his tour. They're a bridge. The quantum seed suddenly expanded, its energy filling the laboratory with dancing lights. But instead of the chaos such an expansion should have caused, the patterns formed perfect geometric shapes that slowly morphed into fluid organic forms, a physical representation of the harmony between crystalline precision and human adaptability. "It's beautiful," one of the new crystalline arrivals whispered, their form unconsciously shifting to mirror the patterns. Naira's colors rippled with deep emotion as she understood what they were seeing. This is what the collective feared, and what they failed to understand. Change doesn't have to mean losing oneself. It can mean becoming more than we ever imagined possible. She reached out to touch the energy field, and for the first time, Julian did the same. Their fingers met in the quantum field, crystalline and human flesh intersecting, in what should have been an impossible connection. The seed's energy flowed around them, through them, binding without consuming. 20 years, Naira said, her voice carrying both wonder and a hint of old sorrow. 20 years I spent trying to protect the galaxy from power that could destroy it. And all along, the key wasn't isolation or control. It was connection. The station's crystals began to sing, but this time the song was different. It wasn't just harmonics anymore. It carried the complexity of human music, the unpredictability of emotion, all wrapped in crystalline precision. A new art form, born of two species learning to exist as one. The Council of Resonance was right about one thing. Naira continued, watching as humans and crystalline beings throughout the laboratory began working together, adjusting to each other's presence with increasing ease. This power could change everything. But change isn't always destruction. Sometimes, it's creation. Julian smiled, still amazed that he could now stand so close to her without causing quantum interference. So what comes next? Naira's form shifted, taking on a configuration that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Neither purely crystalline nor human mimicking, but something uniquely her own. We expand the research, not just quantum physics anymore, but the science of connection itself. How different species can work together, grow together, become more than the sum of their parts. "And you?" Julian asked softly. 20 years of solitude, followed by 6 months of transformation. "What do you want?" Naira was quiet for a moment, her colors shifting through deep, thoughtful shades. "I want to build bridges," she said finally. "Not just between humans and the collective, but between all species who think they must choose between isolation and contamination. There's always another way. We just have to be brave enough to find it." The quantum seed pulsed one final time, its pattern settling into a stable configuration that nobody had ever seen before. It was neither chaotic nor rigidly ordered, but a perfect balance between the two, just like Naira herself had become. "You know," Julian said, watching as more ships appeared in the distance, human and crystalline vessels approaching the station together. "For someone who spent 20 years alone, you've become quite good at bringing people together." Naira's laugh echoed through the station, causing the crystals to chime in harmony. "Perhaps that's why the isolation was necessary. Sometimes we must understand solitude completely before we can truly appreciate connection." As if in response to her words, the quantum storm outside the station shifted, its energies forming a bridge between the approaching vessels. A path forward, built of light and possibility, leading away from isolation and toward a future where differences didn't divide, but strengthened. 20 years of solitude had ended, but the real journey, the journey of connection, of growth, of becoming more than anyone thought possible, was just beginning.